This is the new Fujifilm GFX100RF. Is this thing any good? Roll that intro. Hi everyone, welcome to Pal to Tech. Today we are talking about the brand new 102 megapixel fixed lens GFX100RF mirrorless digital camera. It retails for about $4,900. By definition, that's a lot of money, okay? But for a 102 megapixel sensor, medium format, compact camera that is about the size of my X-T5, I don't know. Okay, let's see what's inside here. With that camera is a 49mm protective filter, a lens hood, adapter ring, hood cap, lens cap, and a shoulder strap. Now, as soon as I held this camera for the first... That sounds like a parrot. As soon as I held this camera for the first time, I expected it to be a lot heavier, but it wasn't. It actually weighs 735 grams. At 90.4 millimeters high by 133.5 millimeters wide, this is Fujifilm's smallest GFX camera ever released. The top of the camera contains your hot shoe mount, a combined shutter speed and ISO dial, your on-off switch and shutter release, as well as a custom button and an exposure compensation dial. The shutter speed dial does not turn very easily, which is good because that means it can't accidentally be moved. But once you lift up the little ring right here, the ISO dial moves very easily. Once you snap the ring back down, it'll hold it in place. Now don't go away, we'll be right back. Neutral density filters can be very helpful exposure tools. They give you much more creative control over your camera's exposure settings in bright conditions. These awesome Nano X-Series variable ND filters from K&F CONCEPT are the perfect complement for your Fujifilm camera. This handy carrying case contains the scratch-proof, waterproof, specially coated optical glass filter. And right here, this clever orange pull strap makes it very convenient to quickly access the filter. The filter coating uses true color technology to ensure accurate color reproduction without vignetting, color casting, or those awful X-cross issues. These filters are available in all kinds of sizes and options. My favorite is this 2-in-1 ND232 that also includes a CPL polarizer filter built right in. The sturdy, smooth motion allows you to change the density of the filter without shaking or jostling the camera. I will leave a link down below in the description of this video where you can check them out. And now, back to the show. Now, the very first thing I did when I took the camera out of the box was attach the protective filter with the adapter ring. And right here in a very prominent place is the new aspect ratio dial. And what it does is it allows you to select up to 9 separate aspect ratios. The camera will then crop in appropriately. This will only affect straight out of the camera JPEG files. The original RAW files that come out of the camera will retain their full size. And something else about the aspect ratio feature that I liked is that you can choose from a frame line, a black surround, or a grayed out surround for the ratio preview in the EDF and LCD screen. Also on the back, you have your focus mode switch, auto exposure focus lock, command dial, Q button, and a smaller than X-T5 joystick, I'll get to that in a minute, as well as the DISP back button, playback, and drive buttons. Right here is the 5.76 million dot 0.84 mag electronic viewfinder that has a built-in refresh rate of 100 frames per second. To the left of it is a diopter dial, and right down below is a 3.15-inch 2.1 million dot LCD touchscreen. Now, the screen tilts out with the same two different 2-axis directions as the X100 camera. The front of the camera has a digital teleconverter selector. The main point of the digital teleconverter is to allow you to crop in at different focal lengths. And you can crop in at 45 millimeters, 63 millimeters, or 80 millimeters. Right above the digital teleconverter selector is a front command dial. And right here is a control lever with another separate custom button inside of it. And with this control lever, you can assign custom settings to additional movement options, such as long pull or short pull with this thing. Now, the left side has a solid cover that houses a separate microphone and headphone port, as well as a micro HDMI and USB-C port. The USB-C port will support an external SSD for additional storage. And the camera can be plugged right into a computer so that you can use a medium format Fujifilm $5,000 camera as a UVC webcam. Hi, I'm here on my Zoom call, In sepia, the right side of the camera contains two separate UHS-2 SD card slots, while the bottom of the camera has your tripod mount and a battery cover. The camera does use the larger NPW235 batteries, exactly the same as the X-T5 and other GFX camera models. You get around 800 frames in normal mode using a fully charged battery. You can shoot in both 16-bit RAW as well as 10-bit HEIF format still images. And of course, and it goes without saying that this comes with all of the current Fujifilm film simulations. And it offers a native ISO range from 12,800 all the way down to 80. But for video shooting, it's 100. It also has extended ISO as well, just like the other X and GFX series models. This camera can shoot in a burst mode of up to 6 frames a second. Some burst rate options will only work with electronic shutter turned on. The file size for the highest quality 16-bit fine image on this camera is about 209 megabytes each. And that will give you an image of 11,648 by 8,736 pixels. The shutter speed range on this camera is from 1/4000th of a second in mechanical shutter up to 1/16,000th of a second in electronic shutter. Let's talk about the lens for a bit. It is a 35mm f4, which is equivalent to 28mm in a 35mm format. The lens contains 10 elements in 8 groups, and the minimum focus distance is 20 centimeters. Here's what that distance looks like. Although the lens aperture ring has these f-stop markings right here, you can turn and actually control and set the lens in 1/3 stop increments. There are 2 small tab handles on both sides of the aperture ring. This makes turning the aperture ring very easy, regardless of where your hands are positioned. The shutter itself is a leaf design instead of a focal plane shutter. It allows flash sync speeds up to 1/4000th of a second. This camera has no built-in IBIS for stills shooting. However, there is a digital IBIS for video. We'll get to it in a bit. Overall, the camera is very light and it's easy to use with one hand. In fact, you can reach almost all of the controls with just one hand. However, I did find the grip itself not to be deep enough. I do wish it had more depth to it. While the ergonomics and placement of the buttons and controls of this camera are excellent, I must also mention though that this tiny joystick on the back right here, I far prefer having a D-pad. And the problem with this one that I noticed and I kept running into is that it was too short. I would try and go to the right or to the left and instead accidentally push the button in and select a menu item. Let's now take a look at image quality. So looking straight ahead at 100% at f4, it's quite sharp. Let's zoom into 200%. I mean, look at this. Going up to the corners now. Lots of detail, looking great. Honestly, I didn't think it was going to be this good at f4, and it is this good at f4. Here we are at f5.6, looking at the RAW file. Zoomed into 300%. Here's a straight out of camera JPEG comparison between f4 and f5.6. Let's go into 300. You really have to go down far and pixel peep. And if you do that, yeah, you will see a little bit of softness at f4. If we flip over to the straight out of camera JPEG, the vignetting has been taken care of. We can jump to the corner and they look great. Here's f11, looking at the center now. Now, as we are hitting f11 and continuing to stop down the lens, I would expect to see some softness. The issue is how much softness, right? So here we have f5.6 versus f11. Jumping to the middle, zooming into 200%. And at 300%, continuing now to stop down the lens. Here is f16 at 300% in the center. Corners look great. Okay, let's stop it all the way down to f22. Taking a look at the RAW file right here at f22, jumping into the center. Oh, I can tell already. Let's go 200% and 300%. So let's look at the extremes. f4 versus f22. Okay, zoomed in at 200%, there's the softness right here. So as you know, the widest that this lens can go is f4. Let's now take a look at subject isolation and background bokeh. Here is a straight out of camera JPEG at f4. This is one of those things where it's purely subjective. Nevertheless, you can definitely blur the background out at f4 in certain cases like this, for sure, if your subject is very close to the camera. Here's a RAW file right here, and as you can see, the subject is a little bit further away from the camera. Again, though, based on your perspective with objects behind it, you never know how much subject isolation you can get. Here's a RAW file, and zooming in to 100%, look at that detail. Even going into 200%, you can see the tiny little wispy things right here. And yet if you pull back, look how far away you are. Now, as far as that aspect ratio feature is concerned, here's a straight out of camera RAW file. Now, I have this open in Capture One, and it is clearly the correct aspect ratio. If you are using one of these crop factors, if you shoot JPEG only, that is what you are going to get, period, okay? If you shoot RAW, the RAW file will not have that as a permanent edit that's impossible to put back to how it used to be. The thumbnail preview shows that there's more image. You see that? However, when you click on the RAW file and you see it straight in the editor like this, the RAW file is cropped. No, it's not. Go up to the crop area and just change this to original. Look at that. Then you could just do whatever you want. Get rid of the girl. Boom. So here endeth this lesson, all right? Which is, if you're going to be using that little aspect ratio dial, why not shoot in both RAW and JPEG? And say 3 years down the line, you suddenly realize you don't like the crop factor, you don't like the ratio that you have for that photo, no problem. Just open up that RAW file that you saved, and you can simply just get the entire area of the image back. Speaking of cropping, let me tell you something. When you're using a medium format camera, cropping becomes an art in and of itself. This is a straight out of camera JPEG right here. And I'm pretty far away from this Shetland sheepdog that is running about the speed of a bullet toward me, but watch what happens when I go to crop. You ready? And crop. Have a look at that. As far as any lens flaring or chromatic aberration problems, I did not notice much of anything with this lens. Let's talk about dynamic range. Fujifilm states that the GFX100RF will give you up to 14 stops of dynamic range. Here we have a very difficult scene. Obviously, you could just expose for the inside like this, but you'll have nothing here. We are looking at a straight out of camera JPEG. Let's flip over to the corresponding RAW file and try turning down our highlights. Have a look at that. That is a lot better. No, it's not perfect. And of course, you can always bump up the shadows as well. Look at that. Switching over to Adobe Lightroom so that you can see the difference between the two editors. Again, turning down the highlights, bumping up the shadows. Now, if you try and do the same thing to the JPEG, look at that. Look at the difference between these two. Let's take a look at performance in low light and high ISO. So looking at the straight out of camera JPEG, this is ISO 2000. Outstanding. Let's jump now to 6400. And looking at it, this looks really good. And for Fujifilm cameras, usually I recommend not going much above 6400 ISO. However, let's take a look at 8000. Let me crank up the shadows and see what that does to our noise. Look at this. You can read what's on here. Okay, here's 10,000 ISO. Definitely seeing some right there. You see that? That's the technical term for it. Now we come to the highest native ISO. Now, if you don't know what native ISO means, you definitely want to see my entire video explaining exactly what ISO is. So with the native ISO of 12,800, I will go ahead and brighten up the photo a little bit, bump up the shadows. There we go. I'm really pushing that exposure on a JPEG. And yeah, I mean, this kind of sucks, okay? I mean, it's not great. If we flip over to the RAW file version of this, and we do the same thing here, turn down our highlights, bump up our shadows, bump up exposure. All right, have a look at that. 12,800 ISO, zooming in. Let's talk autofocus. I must tell you that I found the autofocus on the GFX100RF better than any other GFX camera. This new camera is using the new X-Trans 5 sensor and the X 5th generation processor as well, with all of the AI and new autofocus features that comes with. And for the most part, it kept up. I have no doubt that autofocus will continue to evolve and get better for medium format cameras. Let's talk about video on this camera. Yes, it shoots great quality video, but the best resolution you're going to get out of this camera is 4K 30p 10-bit 422 internal. You can't go 6.2K, you can't go 8K like the GFX100R. You do get F-Log and F-Log2, and F-Log2 should give you around 13 stops of dynamic range. And with that, you're going to probably want to use Eterna with this camera if you're going to get into video. It also does not offer the high frame rate, slow motion 120p options. This was never designed to be both a stills and video camera, maximum features and capacity. I would say that autofocus for video on this camera is not bad at all. I think it's actually a bit better than the X100S. I think the X-T5 and the X100VI both have better autofocus than this camera. Remember, medium format here. This camera does include all of the professional video tools. For example, you've got waveforms to help with your exposure. You have a built-in RGB parade to check for color shifts, and a vectorscope to help you color correct and ensure that your saturation is right. Also included, just like the X100VI, is a 4-stop ND filter, and the ND filter will give you up to 4 stops of exposure control. When I first heard that the camera does not have any IBIS, and instead they just stuck digital video stabilization in here, I'll be honest with you, I actually rolled my eyes. My eyes went, In fact, I was all ready and had assumed that when I went to take this camera out for a test, with the X-T5, I had assumed that this was going to fail miserably. And I was going to make a funny bit. Instead of doing the usual walk down a path, right? Just watch. So for this next test, I want the video settings are as close as I could match them. Okay, wait, hold up. I had to stop because that dolly thing did not have enough horsepower or torque or whatever you call it to move the camera. And frankly, I didn't want to go faster on it because I didn't want the whole thing to fall over. And yeah, here's the GFX100RF with digital stabilization off. I am going to turn on digital stabilization. I couldn't believe what Fuji was able to pack into this camera in the form of software and programming, right? To actually stabilize that video image in real time. Before I end the video, I want to talk about the big issue items with this camera. You are stuck having only one lens. This is a great lens, okay? I love this lens. I love the focal length. I love the image quality from it. Everyone has their preference, right? And mine has always been the flexibility of being able to quickly switch out lenses whenever I feel like it. And this is the lens you're going to have on this camera. And also, and related to that, is that the widest that you can open this lens up is f4. If this were an interchangeable lens camera, if I want to have a really narrow depth of field or I just want a different focal length, no problem, I just switch it out. Being stuck with f4 on the same lens forever and ever and ever, again, my personal preference. Many of you are no doubt going to love the fact that this is a kind of a rangefinder style camera with a fixed lens. The next item to consider is that it has no IBIS for stills. So this may or may not affect you depending upon the type of shooting that you do. If you have your shutter speed set to 1/60th of a second or lower, most likely, just my prediction here, is that you will probably be needing to more often raise your ISO value, which actually with this camera isn't too much of a problem because the ISO performance at higher values is very good. To sum it up, this is a very interesting camera because I'm not sure exactly where to place it. If you want to get into medium format and you don't mind a fixed lens, this is the best medium format camera that I've ever seen. It is so small and compact that you literally forget you're out shooting with a medium format camera. Of course, it is also a medium format camera. And because of that, you are not going to probably want to use this thing to try and capture fast action sports photography or, wildlife, animals moving quickly, birds, I wouldn't do that. This is not the camera for that. So today I will be boxing this camera up and sending it back to Fujifilm. I actually enjoyed using it a lot more than the X100VI or the XM5. I think what Fujifilm did with this camera was incredibly bold and daring. They took what was traditionally an extremely expensive format. And they made it more affordable, and they made it more accessible for a wider range of photographers. Not only that, but with the release of the GFX100RF, they gave it a hell of a lot of style and premium craftsmanship as well. Well, anyhow, I want to thank you so much for watching, and I hope you found the video helpful or at least entertaining. And if you did, be sure to give it the like and subscribe. I'll see you in a new video very soon. Take care.